Hey guys, Naz here. Today I'm going to be taking you over how to make abs in your plush. So this is really awesome for things like a buff werewolf, or if you're making something like a Super Saiyan or just an anime character that has a really buff chest. This is pretty easy to do actually, so I'm hoping that you guys will find a lot of uses for this. I actually thought I'd already made a tutorial on this for some reason, but I don't think I'd actually filmed it. I might have just mentioned it in passing a few years ago when I was working on some buff characters. Here's what the chest looks like all finished. I'm not really going to go over how to pattern the torso section. If you want to see how to pattern this werewolf or this torso in particular, you can go and have a look at my werewolf making tutorial. But really, you just need a shape that's roughly torso shaped, and anything will do. Just make sure that it's quite firmly stuffed, because we're going to be doing a bit of thread sculpting. Now here's the sort of blank torso we have of our character. It's a little bit easier to do this when you don't really have like arms and hair and things involved, so I like to do it sort of at this stage where you've got a nice blank canvas. So I've already pre-sewn the pecs. All I did was use my torso pattern as a template, create the pecs off of that. Really, you can just draw them on a piece of paper and you're just sewing the two sides together, and then you can go ahead and attach those. You can either hand sew them on with a ladder stitch, or you could glue them on with hot glue. Either works. I used both in this situation. I ladder stitched around the top and the sides, and I glued in the middle and at the bottom to leave a bit of a ridge, because ladder stitching tends to blur the line between the pieces that you're sewing together, and I want those pecs to be quite obvious. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get one of these friction markers. You might have used them before. They're really good for marking out pale coloured minky, and these markers are heat removable, so you can just run like a hairdryer or something on them and it will make that ink disappear. Now I've just got a reference up on my computer screen that you can't see. Just search abs and you can bring up whatever type of abs you want to recreate. There's sort of some that are more defined than others, some that have sort of more bumps in them. I'm not really sure about the anatomy of them, but I'm just doing a really generic one that I found a nice picture of. So I'm just drawing in the guidelines of all the lines I want my abs to have. And then once we've got all our guidelines in place, we're going to start doing our thread sculpting. So I've got a doll needle here. It's probably about 10 or 12 inches long, I would say, maybe a little bit smaller. But if you find a doll needle, that's perfect for doing thread sculpting like this. And I've just doubled over a long length of cotton thread. You want it to be quite long, because I think I had to redo the thread maybe 3 times on this, but if you make it too short, you're going to be having to redo your thread just many times, and it's very frustrating. I would also recommend using some sort of thread conditioner or thread wax. So I've used a product here called Thread Magic, and it's sort of like a waxy substance that you run your thread through, and it stops it tangling as much. Because you're using such a very long piece of thread, you really don't want it to be knotting and tangling all the time. So I'm just embedding the knot of the end of the thread somewhere where it won't be seen. So in this case I'm just doing it where the neck is going to cover it, and that just embeds it nice and securely in the plush. Then I'm bringing it in sort of down through the torso on the inside and out at the bottom of the center line of our abs. And from there we're just going to be making kind of like tight loops. So you're going to bring your needle to the top of your center ab line and then back to the bottom where you just came out, and you're going to repeat that a few times, pulling the thread nice and tight to get that sort of definition, and it's going to pinch that center line into the minky. So do that a few times until your thread is nice and secure, and then we'll move on to doing the other lines. But it's really just a repetition of this process to make the rest of the lines in our abs. One thing I'll bring up is this kind of thread sculpting. It's not really suitable for plush that are going to be handled by kids. It's quite sturdy, but if you accidentally rubbed it against something sharp or rough and you snapped one of the threads, it could unravel the whole set of abs. So I'm not saying that to sort of make you worry, but just something to keep in mind, that this is more a technique for plush that are made for display, or an adult that is going to be taking good care of them. So now that we've done our center vertical line, we're going to work on some of the horizontal lines. So you can see that I'm coming into the plush and out sort of at the left of that top horizontal line, and I'm just doing the same process, going from side to side, creating those high tension loops. You can see me pulling the thread down. You want to keep that thread nice and tight. You want to repeat that 2 or 3 times just until your thread is nice and secure, and it's going to maintain that sort of pinched shape. So the order of operation that I like to usually do this is do your center line first, then do all your horizontal lines, and then you can come in and you can do the vertical lines that are at the sides. So you can add as many of these lines as you want, depending on the style of abs you're going for, depending on how sort of extremely muscular you want your plush to look. But this is just the sort of the generic shape that I like to go for. And you can see here that it really gives a very believable ab shape. It sort of pinches them in at the side and has lots of lovely tapers and dips and valleys and that sort of thing. And it really, to me, is sort of the best way to create realistic looking abs. But really it's just a repetition of this process, doing all of the horizontal lines, then all of the vertical lines. You can even change up the order of operations on this. I just like doing it in this order. For some reason it just gives really nice definition when you do that order of operation when making the abs. So each time that you run out of thread, you just want to pierce it through the plushie to somewhere where it's going to not be seen if you make a knot. So I just brought it out to where the tail's going to be attached and just make my little knots at the back there to secure the thread, and that won't be seen once the tail is hand sewn on top of that. But essentially you're just going to keep repeating this process, keep making thread for as many times as you need. I think I made thread, did need batches of thread maybe 3 or 4 times, but just keep going until you're happy with it. And don't be afraid if you have to redo it. With thread sculpting, I often redo things at least twice most of the time. The threads usually aren't too hard because you have those drawn guidelines in there, and it's all straight lines, which makes it a fair bit easier. Once you're really happy with all your thread sculpting, all your knots are secured in place, you can go ahead and get like a hairdryer on a low setting and just put it over those abs, and that will make all those lines you did with that friction marker invisible. But here you have the finished product. You can choose to use a thread that matches the colour of your plush, or you can use a darker one. If that's what you're going for, it might give you a more anime look to it, a more drawn look. But I really hope you guys like this tutorial. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a private message on Patreon or social media, and I'll do my best to help you out. So I'll see you in the next one. Bye!